It's time to start writing some code. When we installed the project, we were given a few starter files inside the source directory. It provides a basic example on how you would create components and structure them. That was nice and all, but I want to start from scratch. We'll clean up the project so that we can focus on the basics. We're going to delete the components and assets directories. Neither are necessary. Then inside the app component file, we're going to remove the style block. Adding CSS to a component is completely optional. If you decide not to have stylings for your component, then Vue will not throw an error. We're also going to reduce the code inside the script and template blocks. On the script block, remove the setup attribute. This attribute is a shorthand syntax for the composition API, which we won't be using in this section. Unless I state otherwise, this attribute should always be removed from the script block. The bare minimum requirements for a single component file to be valid is the template block. The template block must contain at least one root element. We're allowed to have multiple root elements in an application. Inside the template, we're going to add a simple greeting in the form of a paragraph. Let's make the greeting more dynamic. Inside the script block, we're going to export an object. The object we're exporting will be used for the component settings. This is where you should add your data, methods, computed properties, and watchers. Everything's the same as before. Before we jump into adding the data, I want to assign this component a name. We'll add a property called name. The name property isn't required, but it can be useful for debugging. The Vue developer tools will use this property for the name of the component. Sometimes Vue will display components as anonymous when it doesn't know what name to give it. By assigning a name to your components, it'll become easier to identify them in the developer tools. We'll set the name option to app. You can name your components whatever you want. Generally, you should keep it to alphanumeric characters and hyphens. Next, let's set up the data function. Inside this object, we'll add the property message with a value of hello world. Next, we'll replace the static text in the template with the expression message. Let's give things a test. Inside the command line, run the command npm run dev. You shouldn't receive any errors thus far. We'll preview the app in the browser. We'll see the message get outputted in the browser. This confirms the component is working. Almost everything we've learned so far still applies to components. The main difference is that we have a better separation of logic. It's much easier to work with components when the template has syntax highlighting. If we were to open the Vue developer tools, we would find the component with the name we gave it inside the name property. Once again, this is useful for debugging. The dev tools tend to give some components the name anonymous. Assigning a name to your component will stop that from happening. The developer tools will capitalize the name for you if you decide to keep it lowercase. That's the basics of creating a component with single file components. We'll continue exploring what else we can do with component files in the next lecture.